about you. My booth mates believed from about the 7th inning on, when Johan took them out for the 8th, that he was going to do it. I wasn't convinced until strike 3 on David Freese, because you and I have been down this road enough time in our lives as fans and broadcasters that there was no reason to believe that it was possible. And frankly, around the 6th inning with the pitch count the way it was, I was certainly thinking that he wasn't even going to get the opportunity to do it. So for it to happen on this night, in these circumstances, with this guy, somehow makes it even more special than it would have been, say, and I'm only throwing out this name because he has such a seminal game in Mets history, if Dave Malicki had done it. You know, this was just, it was magical, it was theatric. He is baseball royalty, and now the number 8020 can get tossed out the window.
Yeah, in fact, I even made a comment after the game, and I wonder if you feel the same way. What are we going to complain about now? Well, I mean, this is such a part of what's been the Mets fabric over the years, this unique little thing about never having had a no-hitter. Well, now that's over with. Now what do we have?
Well, this is like the Red Sox winning in 2004. I mean, all of a sudden, the level gets ratcheted up somehow. But it's also I think it's really in keeping with what we've seen from this team so far this year. There's been so many unlikely stories with this team. Even the guy who made the great catch and then has to leave the game, kid from Queens, saves the no-hit bid. So much has happened with this team already. Just the fact that they're, as far over 500 as they are, and within shouting distance of first place, and with as many people hurt as they've had, with all the low expectations that they've had, and all the down times that this franchise has been through over the last half dozen years, they needed this. They really did, and it was the right thing to happen at the right moment, and to do it against the best offensive team in the league. I mean, there are just so many factors, not the least of which is the fact that, a player who has come back from a surgery that nobody has similarly come back from. It's a wonderful, wonderful night.
He may be the next pitcher to write a book after this, because R.A. Dickey's story is poignant enough, but where Johan Santana has been physically over the last couple of years, to have this happen is also quite remarkable. But, it's funny because I'm in total agreement with what you were saying about how you had severe doubts that Johan would finish this game. I don't think we need to look for it necessarily, but I remember saying somewhere around the 4th or 5th inning that, look, if you're starting to think that tonight's the night, forget it. Terry specifically said before the game, 110, 115 pitches tops. And you could tell as he walked 4 batters through 5 innings that if he had any chance of completing this game, he was going to have to go into territory that he'd never ventured before. And 134 pitches turned out to be 9 more than he's ever thrown in a game.
Right, not just territory that he'd never been in before post-surgery, but that he'd ever been in before. You go back to the game that he pitched at the end of 2008, pitching on 3 days rest on the bad knee, and he threw 125 pitches in that game against the Marlins. Which was an extraordinary effort in its own right, but who would have even anticipated that this was possible? And the thing about it was, early on in the game, even though he hadn't a lot of hit, he was not on top of his game by any means, didn't have his best stuff, but he's a remarkable guy. I mean, in addition to being a great pitcher, Santana he's one of those people who just has a great sense of self and a way of carrying himself that provides comfort to those around him. You talk about leadership. He is a leader in every sense of the word, and I think he also has a great sense of who he is, what his standing is, and what he's capable of, and I think we saw all of that from him tonight.
Just about every professional athlete is innately competitive. It's part of what makes them professional. There's another level of competitiveness to Johan Santana. I think back to the game against Atlanta, where he lasted, an inning and a third and gave up 4 hits and 6 runs. His next outing against Miami, you could tell he had a different sense of purpose because of what had happened in his previous start. So, that speaks to a little bit of the competitive nature that allows him. Now, who is calling me now?
Everybody.
I guess, but they'll just...
I don't know about your phone, but mine's been blowing up for the last 45 minutes.
By the way, whoever it is, we're on the air, and you'll have to wait. Anyhow, there's just a different level of competitiveness that someone like Johan Santana has. And you just wonder, because I know Terry's scared stiff in hearing his comments post-game about, stiff comes into play, what might be the feeling Johan has in that shoulder a few days from now. I wonder if the adrenaline and the competitiveness mitigates against any of what Mother Nature can do to you.
I don't know, and you have to give Terry kudos here because you know that he was under tremendous internal pressure in the decision making that he made, and if you're Sandy Alderson and you have another year at huge money invested in this guy for next year, you have to be saying to yourself, well, we'd love to see him pitch the no-hitter, but is this the right thing to do? And I'm sure Terry's stomach is doing flips during that game, pondering those same questions.
Broke his bat. Did you see that ball dropping into center field?
Yes.
So did I. Question 2. With Freese batting and Santana behind in the count, when you looked on deck, did you say to yourself, oh no, not Yadier Molina again?
Well, what I said on the air when we showed Molina on deck, I said Molina, who has broken Mets hearts before, would be next.
Now, you have an advantage. Here's question 2A, because I took a little bit different tack. I'm not ashamed to say it because I kept everybody well informed that the Cardinals didn't have a hit. There have been many times when I've come right out and used the words no-hitter. Or word no-hitter, phrase no-hitter, whatever you want to call it. I specifically stayed away from that tonight.
Really?
Yep, I did.
That surprises me.
I just felt something a little different. I said, let me try something a little different tonight.
Well, I did not do that.
I said the Mets have all the hits and all the runs and, all things like that. And, I go back to the reason I feel a little ashamed of that is because I think back to John Sterling, when Jim Abbott pitched his no-hitter for the Yankees, listening to some of that from the 7th inning on, with every out that was recorded, Sterling said, Jim Abbott, 8 outs away from a no-hitter, 7. Tonight I just took a different tack. So you stayed true to...
I don't think I said the words until the 5th or 6th inning, but I've never felt that way, and I didn't feel any different about it tonight, and I know people complain sometimes. I'm sure you've heard it as much as I have. You're jinxing it from the booth and all that. But my feeling has always been we have a responsibility to report. I did, and somehow it happened nonetheless.
Really? Did you ever hear from Turk Wendell, by the way? I don't mean recently. I mean when a no-hitter was in play for a Mets pitcher. If I ever said the words no-hitter, I'd hear from Turk the next day, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're jinxing us. You're jinxing us. So I purposely kept saying it.
Just for him.
Yeah, and they purposely, so it would seem, never did get that no-hitter until tonight.
Did he have any of your teeth on his necklace?
No, because if I did finally, exactly, that's what would happen. That guy would hunt down my bicuspids in no time. But the final question for you, when the final out was recorded, when Freese swung and missed, for the first split second, were you in utter disbelief?
Yes. Yes, because up until that moment, I've always said this. People have asked me more than one time this year, as a matter of fact, about my thoughts about the Mets having never had a no-hitter. And I always say, I don't think it will ever happen. And, part of that is defense mechanism, right, because you don't want to be disappointed. But part of that I really believed. And at the point when that last pitch came to Freese, I was still expecting to see a hit. And when he swung and missed, and funny, Josh turned around to check with the umpire before he went out to hug Santana, because even he was making sure it was real, and it was. And it was almost impossible to believe.
Josh Tolley has just called the greatest game in the history of New York Mets catchers, and he does it his first game back from the disabled list.
Clear-headed.
Maybe Ty Wigginton should run into all of us. Anyway, a night that will live forever in the history of the New York Mets, and I'm glad we both got to work this game.
Thanks for inviting me in. This was a very it was an unprecedented night, but even more than that, again, as I said before, under other circumstances it would have been special, but I think it was even more special tonight because of who and what and how and all the trappings that went into it, and I couldn't be happier for Johan.
Yeah,
I mean, he is everything that you would ask for your frontline pitcher to be, injured or not. He has fulfilled in every way the expectations that the Mets had for him when he arrived. And for this to happen, especially post-surgery, it just made it an absolutely stupendous evening.
And probably the most euphoric post-game feeling that a Met fan has ever had short of winning a World Series.
Well, they've done that twice.
Yeah.
They have done this before.
This is unique. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Alan.
Well, there are other scores to check from out of town. I don't particularly care a whole heck of a lot about them right now, but we will check in and see who's done what tonight, because this game certainly stands on its own. They've already dug up the pitcher's mound, presumably to send that to the Hall of Fame. And there will be other Johan Santana artifacts, I'm sure, making their way up to Cooperstown, and someday his left arm will join them up there as well, if he continues on the path that he is set to this point. The Mets win it 8-0. They beat the Cardinals as Johan Santana has pitched the first no-hitter in the history of the New York Mets. We will check the out-of-town.